to help mitigate impacts, whether there are visual impacts or sound impacts. And certainly the design is not by any means finalized at this point. We're at the stage of trying to see if we can get funding for it. Depending on how that goes, then we would get into design stages, and we would, as a part of that, most assuredly have more input from neighbors as to specific issues and concerns.
Well, I mean, the biggest concern is that we're removing a park from behind our houses and putting in a industrial complex, right? Mm-hmm. And typically, for home values, having the park there with the green space and everything would be a added benefit that would typically increase a property value, whereas something industrial back there would detract from the property value.
No, certainly that's something that is part of the consideration in the decision making. And as I said, I think there'll be some more opportunities to have conversations about that as plans are being developed and going forward. So I would stay tuned for that, and certainly we can get you in touch with information on that. Mr. Trudgeon, did you have something you wanted?
No, I'll give you my card, and you can reach out to me, and I'd be happy to chat with you some more. As the mayor mentioned, there is some pre-design work that just kind of shows squares and where there's a lot more work that needs to be done. Obviously, the first step would be to see if that referendum passes, if that project's moving forward. But certainly, we understand your concerns, and we take them very seriously. We do want to work with the neighborhood as much as possible. I'll give you my card. You can reach out to me. I'd be happy to sit down with you and talk more detail with you and your neighbors.
Sounds good. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And then we are concerned about the referendum, too, because as came out in that latest newsletter, thank you. So either it does go through and then we have that 0.5 sales tax, which would increase our costs living here because we do spend a lot of money in this community to support it. And if it looks like if it doesn't go through, then property taxes would increase. So potentially we're paying for it either way, and our home values might go down as a result of it. It just seems a bit unfair to us that are really directly impacted by that to not get something sort of compensation for that.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments and feedback. We don't necessarily have all the answers for you as part of public comment, but we appreciate hearing from you and certainly encourage you to remain part of the process because there will be a number of decision points as things go forward, depending on, once again, how things go in November.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll check if there's anyone else here for general public comment this evening. All right. Seeing no one then, we'll proceed with the rest of the agenda. First this evening, we do have under recognitions and donations a proclamation related to Indigenous Peoples Day in Roseville. I'll read the proclamation and then a motion from the council would be in order. The proclamation reads as follows. Whereas, for longer than any other people, Indigenous nations have lived upon the land where our nation and city now stand. And whereas Indigenous Peoples Day is an important time to celebrate the rich culture, tradition, and history that acknowledge the important contributions of America's original people. And whereas it is also an opportune time to educate the general public about the severe challenges American Indians have faced both historically and at the present time, and the ways in which American Indians have worked to conquer these challenges. And whereas the land in present day is located on the ancestral and contemporary lands of American Indian people and home of the original people of the Turtle Island since time immemorial, and without whom the building of this city would not have been possible, and holds great historical, spiritual, and personal significance for its original stewards. And whereas American Indians over the many years protected and preserved the landscape of Minnesota and the city of Roseville, including their intrinsic traditional knowledge, labor, technology, science, philosophy, and arts, as well as their cultural belief system that stipulates that they are the protectors and stewards of the natural environment for the benefit of all. And whereas American Indian people today face significant disparities that impact their safety, health, well-being, education, vitality, and cultural preservation, and the City of Roseville understands that in order to help combat these disparities, government entities, organizations, and other public institutions should change their policies and practices to better reflect the experiences of American Indian people and uplift our country's indigenous roots, history, and contributions to ensure greater access to opportunity. And whereas in 1990, representatives from 120 indigenous nations at the first Continental Conference on 500 years of Indian resistance, unanimously passed a resolution to transform Columbus Day into an occasion to strengthen the process of continental unity and struggle towards liberation, and thereby use the occasion to reveal a more accurate historical record. And whereas the Twin Cities community has a strong history of over 4 decades of American Indian activism, which the city celebrates and honors, now therefore be resolved that the city of Roseville hereby declares that we observe Indigenous Peoples Day on October 14th, 2024, in order to promote appreciation, healing, reconciliation, understanding, friendship, and continued partnerships with the American Indian community.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Strawn, seconded by Councilmember Etten to approve that proclamation. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. That proclamation is approved. That then brings us to our business items this evening. We have a handful of business items, beginning with item 7A, which is to consider resolutions and an ordinance allowing the subdivision of a parcel from the west end of the Roseville Covenant Church property and re-guide and rezone it for low to medium density residential development. We have our senior planner, thank you. I tell you, those titles just escape me sometimes. Brian Lloyd with us this evening, and we appreciate him being here to help introduce this item for our consideration. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you. As you mentioned, this is an application that is sort of located at 2865 Hamlin Avenue. This is Roseville Covenant Church, outlined in red there at the intersection of Hamlin and County Road C2. And it's a sort of 3-part application. Before I get into those 3 parts, generally speaking, the church is looking to subdivide this western 120 feet from the property and make it available to somebody to build something on. And in consultation with them in the preceding months, it was clear that even though the church themselves, don't have plans for the redevelopment, that some sort of low to medium density residential would be the only sort of viable, the only reasonable choice in that location for the comprehensive plan change that's required for the application and the zoning change. So the application in front of us tonight is to change the comprehensive plan future land use map guidance of the property from the institutional land use category that applies to it today, which enables the church to be there, change that to low density residential, which is the same comprehensive plan guidance as for the duplexes along County Road C2 behind it. Part of the application then is the rezoning, and the rezoning that's recommended is to the low to medium density residential zoning district, which allows between 5 and 12 dwellings per acre. This is a little bit less than half an acre. I should clarify. Under the comprehensive plan guidance of low density, the limit for density in this low to medium density district is 8 units an acre. The zoning district can be used in other places, which could allow up to 12. So the slightly less than half an acre parcel that's being proposed in this low to medium density district could have somewhere between 2 and 4 units, practically speaking. And the third part of the application this evening then is the subdivision itself. The Planning Commission held the required public hearing for this earlier this month. I believe it was September 4th, and recommended approval of the low density guidance for the comprehensive plan change, the low to medium density zoning district, and recommended approval of the preliminary plat creating this 120-foot wide lot at the western end of the property. The only public comment that we've received since the public hearing, I believe, went directly to the City Council, communication from Tam McGehee, I presume interacting as, on her own rather than a representative of the Planning Commission with this communication to the City Council, and sort of expressing her views on ways that a denial of these particular applications might be found to be justified or amenable to the council members. Aside from that, the Planning Commission did recommend, with a vote of 5-1, the approval of these three applications that I mentioned: the comprehensive plan change, the rezoning, and the preliminary plat, with a few conditions on the preliminary plat approval related to stormwater management and the park dedication that would apply to it. And with that sort of brief summary of the item before the council tonight, I can end my presentation and see if there are any questions that I can answer.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Are there questions from the council on the three items that we have before us related to this property? Councilmember Rett.
I think one of the questions that was brought up there, and it was discussed a little bit at the Planning Commission also, is why do the comp plan and the zoning now?
Because we have an application to consider it. Otherwise, the city isn't looking to sort of proactively change the way regulations apply to given pieces of property to prompt some development.
Okay. And then I have questions maybe better for Mr. Freihammer around stormwater management and trees. Maybe you want to answer, but he's coming up with a smile, so.
It's probably better that he does.
It's always better that the Public Works Director is smiling.
Yes, we like it. Can you talk about the tree preservation thing says all the trees on Lot A would be cut down. I went by there today. Really, they're kind of centered in the lot. You really couldn't build anything if they stayed. As part of the stormwater management for the lots, though, what's the plan for the stormwater pond just to the east and the trees that are around that?
I'm not aware if the trees on that lot would be removed, but any newly created lot will trigger stormwater requirements. So potentially they could either modify the existing pond or build another one, but I'm not aware that we've been presented how they would treat their stormwater because I think they're just looking to split the lot currently. But they would, since it is a newly created lot, they would have to meet stormwater requirements.
Yeah, I think somewhere in here I read that certainly there was a set of neighbors who were concerned about how the pond was working, and I think I read that staff was talking about how that would be updated as kind of, we have a program of updating now, so I didn't know if there was anything in conjunction that was going to happen at the same time.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of, but yeah, that pond probably hasn't had any work done since that was originally built, so I'm sure it's overdue for work. So the timing could work out to do both, do a 2-for-1.
Okay. And the proposed tree preservation ended up with 339 caliper inches. I'm guessing that won't all fit. Right, I mean, look.
I too am guessing that won't all fit.
The church lot as well as this lot just don't seem like they're going to be able to do that. So we'd end up with some maybe mix of some plantings and then cash into our tree preservation.
That's right. It's difficult to say just how that might work out. In most applications where there's a subdivision being proposed and there's a larger lot being reduced in size or split into several lots, the party that's requesting the approval of the subdivision is often one who will be involved in its development and its building. And, in those instances, the trees that are, on the church property today, influence the calculation of what is required for replacement given what is being removed on the proposed lot. And that is true for this, but assuming that the application is approved and this lot is created, it's at that point that the lot would be sold to somebody else who would now be working with a lot that is only this and really has nothing to do with this anymore. Mm-hmm. It's conceivable that some of the replacement trees could still be planted around the church property if the church were open to that. But the site itself is sort of becoming more isolated in terms of the ability to plant trees on a broader property that's still part of the development.
Okay.
So that'll change somewhat in the future if this is
So
approved.
with this tree preservation as part of this proposed series of changes, would that become the responsibility of the church?
It would become the responsibility of the party who buys and proposes to build something on the lot.
But it would be calculated based on this split this time, not the time they purchased the land.
Actually, we would recalculate it at the time that the land is purchased, just because the church itself is no longer part of it. And in fact, I don't remember exactly what is written in the Planning Commission report about this, but the practically speaking, the replacement total is even larger with the sort of future scenario where it's just this lot being redeveloped because it doesn't have the balance of trees on the church property to sort of factor into that calculation. So it's a bit academic though, because it's still the existing replacement total, even with all the trees on the church property, lowering the replacement calculation. That total is already sort of impossibly high for planting on the site. The fact that it's going to be a larger replanting obligation, most likely if something is built on the site when it's sort of considered on its own, like I said, is a bit academic. It's still impossibly high and impossibly higher at that point.
Okay.
So would result in some trees being replanted probably, and then also a fee being paid.
So really, the stuff in the request for council action around tree preservation is more of an exercise in understanding rather than what's being required of the church or, at this point, whoever would own the land until they came in with a development proposal.
That's
Is that
right.
correct?
And that's essentially the same for the stormwater management plan as well.
Yeah.
There is a stormwater management plan that was submitted with the subdivision application because that's one of the requirements. Presumably what is built, it will be different from what is kind of in the proposal today. So the stormwater management plan will be, re-engineered at that point.
Very good, thank you.
All right, are there other questions for staff? Councilmember Strawn.
I may have misremembered, but my understanding was initially when they brought this to the, for comment, were there not more lots that they were looking to section off at that time?
The proposal has always been a single lot on the end of the property just like this.
Okay. I looked at the public hearing and obviously didn't pay close enough attention. I'm curious about the western side. I see that the house behind that abuts, or that fronts C2, the lot line is substantially west of the lot line of this proposed lot. It was a little bit easier
Oh,
to see.
this line?
No,
No?
it was easier to see on the
Oh, over here.
other piece that you had there. I guess I interpreted that line above to be the lot line of the house behind. Almost.
To the north?
Right there, yes.
So this
To the
thing?
north, yes.
So there are lots here that go out to C2, and this is part of one of those lots. I think if we look at this drawing, yeah, so that lot line that I was pointing to there coincides with this one,
Yep.
and then this one on the corner wraps around just a little bit, it looks like, leading to that line there.
Okay. The reason I ask is there's a pretty visible demarcation, footpath from the street out to C2 along that line. So I think, is there some type of easement or something that would be addressed along there that would make that unbuildable? Or how would that, it's kind of hard to see when you're out there where, of course, the line would be because it is quite a bit off from the house on C2. But just wondering, does that, looks like it even goes beyond the street, the turn there.
There isn't any easement or formal trail through there that I'm aware of. Any sort of footpath is probably just an informal cutting through that happens. Yeah, so there wouldn't be anything encumbering the property that would kind of get in an easement, for instance, that would get in the way of doing some development there.
Okay. And it hasn't been requested by any of the neighbors to have a pathway or something between those two?
Not that I've been made aware of. Certainly nobody has asked me about it, and I don't remember seeing it in the summary of the open house conversations that would have happened. I don't remember when that was now, earlier this year when the church was first sort of introducing the idea to the surrounding renters and homeowners and property owners.
Okay. And then, finally, if there was to be some future, if the church were to want to further subdivide this land in the future, what would that possibility be, given that holding pond?
Practically, I think there wouldn't be a possibility. I suppose someone could engineer a situation where all the stormwater is managed in some underground improvements below a new development here, but I don't think that's a practical outcome. I think, there is this 120-ish feet of land that isn't used for something on the site today and would be the limit of kind of what's available to be used in some other way.
Okay, thank you.
Just as a follow-up to that, I imagine that the only way, given the stormwater ponding that's there, would, if the site was decided to be used for something completely different and completely rearranged and, starting from scratch almost, that would be about the only way that something could be done.
Sure.
If things are left the way they are, it doesn't, as you said, doesn't appear to be the case that there would be an opportunity to do further subdivision of that property. Councilmember Strawn.
Has there been a previous use of this site that would potentially have other pollution or anything on the site that hasn't been discussed prior to now?
I think certainly not on this western end. In historical aerial photos, there is some visible buildings. I think a farmhouse over here, and most of this was just field. And at some point, ending in the early 90s, when the church was built here, there had been a couple of other buildings, I think probably in about this location. They looked sort of residential in scale in the aerial photos. I don't know what they were for sure, though. But this has always been vacant and not the home of, some industrial use or, no apparent land filling sort of activity.
Great. Other questions? Councilmember Schroeder.
Just curious, you made a comment about work needing to be done on this pond eventually. What would that entail?
So typically, any BMP or best management practice like a pond typically involves at least minimum of dredging. So most likely, I'm sure sediment has accumulated. So cleaning out the inverts, the inlets and outlets, that's typically what it is. Sometimes vegetation can be problematic too, if that's causing some of the problems. So either vegetation removal and or just sediment removal.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Other questions from council members? Councilmember Groff.
Just going to the tree preservation, when we do the final, when this is sold and it all comes, do they analyze the health of the trees and all that sort in more detail? That's what my understanding is anyway.
That's right. That's part of the, the input in the inventory of the trees. And, if there are, I don't recall there being ash trees in this location, but, where there are ash trees, even if they seem fine still in spite of emerald ash borer, we've been guided by our consulting forester to just go ahead and remove those because they will be, ailing from the pest sooner than later. So there are considerations like that are made, the current health of the tree or the sort of future outlook from diseases or pests and that sort of thing.
Just on a quick walk through, it was a lot of cottonwood trees, which have weak limbs.
Sure.
Nice. Great. If there aren't any other questions from council members, I don't know if a representative of the applicant wishes to make any kind of statement in support of the application. That's totally optional. I don't even know for sure if there is a representative here this evening, but checking on that. That doesn't appear to be the case. All right. And I'll check if there's anyone from the public that wishes to speak to this request for the three actions, the comprehensive plan guidance change, the zoning change, and the plat approval. Doesn't appear to be anybody from the public for this item this evening. We have the request before us. We've got three separate actions, a resolution approving the change of guidance in the comprehensive plan, an ordinance changing the zoning, and then a resolution approving the plat. And I would note that on the resolution related to the comprehensive plan change, because it is a comprehensive plan change, that does require a supermajority vote, which in the case of the city council, it's 2/3, it would have to be 4 of the 5 council members. With that, we probably do want to take the actions in an organized order in the sense of you don't want to rezone something before you've guided it. So the first thing to consider would be the resolution attachment 3, re-guiding the property. Councilmember Groff.
I would move to adopt a resolution approving the proposed amendment to 40 comp plan, future land use map.
I'll second it.
All right. It's been moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Schroeder, to approve the resolution guiding this property as low-density residential. As the maker of the motion, Councilmember Groff.
I think the proposal makes sense with the land use that is around the property. I did stop by on the way here tonight and talk to a few residents who were outside, and they were not opposed to it. So I think there's a variety of opinions on this, but I think from the information we have, I see no reason not to approve it.
All right, and as the seconder, Councilmember Schroeder.
Well, since the Planning Commission had approved it, and then the staff is recommending it, that also, and I've also been to the property, I feel comfortable going ahead with it.
Other discussion on the motion? Just in response to the communication we got from the Planning Commission member, in regard to this, I think that one of the concerns, raised was sort of loss of small bits of open space. And I think the challenge we have is as a city is, we can't, I don't know that it's reasonable to expect us to be able to sort of gobble up every single one of those spaces in the community. And I also noted in reviewing that after receiving that communication that actually Applewood Overlook is very close to this site and provides a nice amenity to the residents in that area. And actually Cottontail Park isn't that far away either. And so that helped mitigate that concern. I certainly do understand that concern. But as a practical matter, as non-publicly held property, I think it seems like it would be unreasonable for the city to step in and try to interfere with the plans of the property owner at this point. So I just wanted to make that note in response to that communication. But with that, we do have the motion before us to approve the resolution re-guiding the property from institutional to low-density residential. Once again, does require a supermajority vote or 4/5 of the council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, meeting that requirement. The second is an ordinance rezoning the property. That would be an ordinance also in attachment 3. This would rezone the property to, it would be also from essentially institutional to low to medium density residential.
So moved.
Right?
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Schroeder, seconded by Councilmember Etten to approve that ordinance. This just simply requires a simple majority vote, as does the next action. Discussion on this motion, it's essentially codifying what we just passed in the previous resolution. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That ordinance passes unanimously. And then finally, we have the resolution, the third attachment in attachment 3, which is a resolution approving the proposed plat of the site with the separating off of this lot.
I move that.
Second.
All right, that resolution has been moved by Councilmember Etten, seconded by Councilmember Strawn to approve that resolution approving the plat. Discussion on that motion?
No, thank you.
Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. That plat is approved. All right. Thank you to everyone who's been involved in this process, and thank you, Mr. Lloyd, for presenting this evening in your work behind the scenes to get us to this point. With that, then our next item, switching gears from land use to city finances, we have a deadline at the end of this month to certify to Ramsey County our preliminary tax levy budget as well as our EDA tax levy. And I don't know, Pat, are you introducing this item? All right, City Manager Trudgeon, if you could introduce the proposed preliminary 2025 tax levy and budget.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm glad to be here to talk about passing the preliminary tax levy, consider the budget, as well as the preliminary EDA levy. As noted, state statutes do require us by the end of the month to pass a preliminary levy, both on the city side and the EDA side. That levy, once established, cannot be raised. It can be lowered. So typically what we do, we approve a preliminary levy and then use the remaining months in the year to continue to look at the budgets and different components of that, culminating on this year, December 2nd, to adopt the final tax levy for the city and the EDA, as well as the final budget utility rates and the fee schedule, all those things that go into the overall budget here. So as referenced in the staff report, I did present this budget to the council and the levy on August 19th. Attachment 4 in the packet does contain the manager's budget message in PowerPoint, and then we have additional information in attachment 5 with all the line items and the reconciliations. Overall, I am proposing a tax levy of $30,273,603, which is a $1.488 million increase, translates into a 5.17% levy increase. We do typically take a look on how that affects the median valued home. If I could have the computer up, just to note that the median valued home rose from 349,900 to 360,500. And I get my mouse there. Goes up here. So the impact to the single family home is as follows. My mouse. Okay. So, as noted on here, the property tax levy would go up $9.39 per month for the median valued home, and for the EDA levy, 8 cents per month. So for a total of $9.47 per month, which is an annual change if you add both those together, $113.64. This increase is certainly impacted by the levy amount that I am raising. And is there a different number?
Yeah, the numbers in our packet doesn't match what's on the screen here,
The annual change.
the annual change here.
The annual change in the packet is the city only,
And not-
which is $112.68.
Right.
In the RCA.
The printed RCA is city only, and the thing we're looking at is city and EDA.
Well, EDA is in here.
Yeah, that's true.
It says EDA in the packet.
Well, it's easy enough to do the math.
So
check it.
I just, yeah.
So I'm not sure what, I'm not seeing what the difference is here.
Oh, I see.
So
Here,
the
okay.
total dollar change annual
Is
in the
this.
packet says 112.68, which is only 12 times the city number.
Yep, okay.
On your presentation, it says 113.64, which is 12 times the sum, the 947.
Yeah, that's the combined number. So that line item in
The
that
way,
chart.
the way it's listed here, they're different numbers, but it's kind of confusing us.
Yes.
It
Yeah,
It
makes
looks like
sense
they
now.
add up,
Yeah,
but
Yeah, and we have monthly and yearly numbers, and it does get confusing, so
Okay.
our apologies. Okay, I just want to make sure we have the right number. We can all
All right,
agree on
no?
that.
All right.
As referenced from the finance director, there is a memo talking about some of the legislative changes that do impact our levy. Certainly, our increase in levy certainly is the biggest impact, but there have been some changes in the law that also does impact that. So that overall increase, and this is referenced in the packet here, and the both the property value increases and the legislative changes is about $39 of that increase, and the city budgeted tax levy is about $74. So certainly the majority is still related to the tax levy increase, but there's some other factors in play and why that median value changed there. We talked a lot about the EDA at the last meeting, and that is actually keeping the levy flat, but there is a slight impact on homes as mentioned in the packet. Last meeting, we heard from the Finance Commission, and they did recommend the budget as presented by the city manager. And finally, I would mention that at the meeting on the 19th, the city council did talk about 3 items about possibly considering more. One would be to add the HR manager position, which is estimated to be a cost of $146,000, and there's information in the budget memo. Also about adding funding for Tubman, and the number that was used is $20,000, and I have some information in the packet about both Tubman services as well as additional information about NYFS program. They have something similar, and that's in attachment 9. And the third item is the possibility of increased council pay. Never really a conversation about exactly what that would be, but maybe a 3% COLA. So there is some information in the packet in attachment 10 that just indicates where other cities are paying, try to get a cross-section of Ramsey County and some other cities. So I would note that if the city council was considering at least adding the HR manager and the Tubman, the levy increase would go from a 5.17% to 5.75% levy increase, just for your information. So once again, the EDA board did approve, that is you as serving as the EDA board, a preliminary levy of $364,856. In the end here tonight, after some questions, we certainly want to adopt 3 resolutions. One is to adopt the preliminary tax levy, one is to adopt the preliminary budget, and then finally one to adopt the preliminary EDA tax levy. There's a lot of information in the packet. I know you're fairly familiar with it, but I'd be happy to answer any specific questions you have. Our Finance Director, Michelle Petrick, is here as well. If we do talk about adding some things to the budget, we're prepared to kind of calculate the correct numbers. But if we don't do that, then the resolutions as they stand would work. So with that, I'll pause and see if there's any questions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Trudgeon. Are there questions from the council for staff on the proposed preliminary budget and tax levy? Councilmember Strawn.
Not necessarily a question, comment?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we've got the presented numbers. We've got some things that have been brought up for discussion. We can have discussion on those, or we can go whichever direction the council wants to. So why don't you
Okay.
kick it off and see
Worked
which
with
direction we go.
kindergartners, you have to be very clear between the difference between a question and a comment.
Well, it applies sometimes to council.
I just wanted to, I know we did speak on this, and this was somewhat at my behest, the HR manager position. I wanted to just give a bit more voice to that request and give some support for why it would be beneficial. I think when you look at, there is a minimum of 42% turnover every year in staffing, and there are 2 full-time HR people. That is a crazy amount of people that are being hired and sent away every day. I think that it's really important to realize that, so we have 2 people who are full-time HR, and Ms. Olson is ending up doing a lot of that, and we have spoken about that being, additional concern. But I wanted to make sure that the recruiting, the onboarding, engagement, and retention are huge pieces of an HR manager. And this is really important to me as we look at how do we achieve our SRE goals. It's really hard to find that time to be a dedicated recruiter in spaces where you're going to find someone who maybe doesn't look like everyone else in the building. And it's a very intentional process of creating relationships, going to job fairs, making connections to colleges where people who maybe don't look like everyone else are, and that takes some time and builds some relationships. It might not be the person who you see this year, but it might be the person you see next year or the year after. So I just wanted to make sure that as we look to how do we diversify the people who work for us, not to underestimate the value of that HR manager and what they bring to that process. Not only that, if you do bring on people of color who are in a largely non-people of color staff, we need to make sure they receive adequate support and follow-up engagement. They find ways to feel like they belong and part of a team. And it's not just a given. You don't just bring someone on and hope they stay. You really have, it's a very active process. And so in speaking with Ms. Olson and Mr. Trudgeon, just wanting to make sure you're aware that in addition to the turnover, there are significant changes happening in paid family leave, emergency safe and sick leave, or earned safe and sick leave time, and the Fair Labor Standards Act in regard to how paying and compliance goes. And some of those compliance penalties have increased substantially. They could be up in the millions of dollars. And I realize we have the attorney to help us, but you have to know and have the bandwidth to ask the questions to know to make sure that you're complying. So I just also spoke with Mr. Trudgeon about the possibility of funding this as a July 1st, 2025, so for one half of a year. But it is an ask that we would expect in 2026, even if we choose not to fund now. But my suggestion was that we consider it because I don't know how we'll make headway toward our staffing equity goals unless we have someone who's really strongly dedicated to that as a process.
Great, thank you. Other thoughts from council members or questions, certainly? Councilmember Bratton.
On that subject, I think reading the data in this and thinking about it, that some level of support might be important. Certainly, a lot of work has shifted to that HR component, but a huge part of that has been the part-time staff. So when we look at that turnover rate, a lot of that is part-time folks. So a student getting hired in April or whatever gets onboarded almost exclusively by the Park and Rec department, say if they're doing a Park and Rec job or if they're lawn mowing, whatever, and then they leave. It's not quite the same as hiring permanent employees. And so I also wondered about whether we could use temp service to do a push and do additional support in a time window when there is a significant amount of hiring that happens, as a different way to address this, at least for the short term. As I look at our levy, certainly it's, not perfect, and we compare it to other cities and we look pretty good, but that's not our, people don't care, right? We look at the impact with the increase in housing values as the pie shifts. It's a pretty big hit. So I want to be cognizant of how much that needle is moving, and this would be the biggest thing. And I also then look at the 2026 budget and the number of things that are here that would be baked into the 26. We're looking at $400,000 before we blink an eye, pay an employee COLA or whatever, right? That was just baked in from what we have this year. And so I'm concerned about how all that adds up, but I'm also thinking about what's a different way to spend less but have an impact on maybe the biggest increased workload for our HR staff.
Well, and I think, there's a couple of different things that are being talked about in this conversation. Certainly what Councilmember Etten talked a lot about was sort of that the onboarding of part-time staff and seasonal staff and things like that. What I saw in the memo was a recommendation for a manager to do a sort of a higher level of activity, which maybe then, can allow the people sort of below that level to do some more of that stuff because of the fact that some of those tasks have moved from other departments into the HR and administrative department. And so I'm reading that a little differently, like I'm not sure that just hiring a couple more temps for part of the year actually gets to what is being asked about as something that needs to be addressed in the memo, from the point of view of a manager. I mean, if the request was, we need to have 3 more temporary people in the summertime or something like that, then that would align better with kind of what I'm hearing from Councilmember Etten, but that's not necessarily what I was reading in the information that was in the memo. So I'm trying to balance those.
I agree with you. And I'm actually, in a preliminary levy, prepared to actually say yes to the position and have further discussion around this understanding of how it would impact the assistant city manager position as well as HR. But anytime someone takes the workload off of someone who's further up, then that's going to free that person up to do some of those more strategic pieces, right? Mm-hmm. Somewhere we're talking about shifting work burden or adding support for that work burden. Mm-hmm. So I agree with your reading of that. I agree with that. I'm thinking about how do we address that maybe differently without as big of an expense. But I'm prepared to put it in the preliminary and then have further discussions and have greater understanding of how that big picture works together. Just to be clear on that.
And I was going to say, Councilmember Groff, as somebody who hasn't weighed in on this
Well,
yet.
just a thought. I mean, so am I hearing that perhaps it would start in July then, so it wouldn't be a full year?
As
I
an
think that's a
option.
proposal. Yeah.
Okay. I see the need for it. I just am not clear in my own mind where that would fall. I would say, I would like us to hire that person carefully, obviously, and I know we all have talked about that before, so I would probably prefer hiring it in the last half of the year and going that route. and also not impacting the budget quite as strongly.
And I think it's a valid point that still the full amount is something that has to be looked at in 2026 then,
Eventually.
yeah. So
Yes.
that,
Yeah, it will come up.
that adds on top of basically the 400,000.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's part of what has to be taken into account for sure. Councilmember Strawn?
I just wanted to, I know it seems somewhat elementary, of course, the Parks Department, but the amount of things that have gone into HR in the last few years, there's a new hire notification that needs to be signed by everybody and copied. And yes, it's very administrative. You could probably have the HR assistant do it, but hopefully by having the HR assistant doing, then the generals can do more recruiting, and then there's just, but yes, there are always some, I think we're putting a lot of the management duties in this situation on Ms. Olson, and then it ends up taking away, we're all human, and there's a max on what we can do. But I just want to make sure, there's just a lot of administrative duties that go with this safe and sick leave, and upcoming with the paid family leave and other things. And as people like to say, they're unfunded mandates. They don't come with, here, help, this will help you. But we have to also make sure, yes, those people are there for a short time, but it doesn't change the burden of getting them in and out of the system. It's still a process, so.
Councilmember Schroeder?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that the different items we're talking about are important. I don't think that's the fact, but from where I'm coming from, I'm still, people are still reeling from the big budget from last year, the 9%. And the city manager did not have this position in his initial budget. He acknowledged this is something we needed to look at going forward. And so I guess I have a tendency to go towards the not putting it in next year and just going with the original budget that was also approved by the Finance Commission. So they approved it the way it is, and the city manager had presented it without these items in. So and again, I'm not debating that any of these items we're talking about aren't important. It's just when and how, because they're, people have to pay for it, and that's what it comes down to. And, trying to give people a little bit of a break from last year is what I've been hearing a lot. And if you look at the emails people sent, they're all talking about trying to keep the property tax down and help us and that kind of thing. So again, it's to me, it's more of a, can we push this expense a little further to give people a little bit of a breathing room for now? So I have a tendency to go more towards the what the city manager proposed originally.
Right, I think we'll circle back to that as we get to the point of looking at motions. We did also have the suggestion by Councilman Bratton in relation to Tubman funding, and I know he's been doing a lot of research and contributed, to getting some of the information that's in the packet as well. So I did want to give you an opportunity, Councilman Bratton.
Thank you.
also
And
to speak
I would
about
like to
this.
acknowledge that Mr. Trudgeon and our police chief, Scheider, had a meeting with the folks at NYFS, as certainly a longtime partner of ours, who have started a program that really is similar in some ways. And before they'd had that meeting, Chief Scheider had spoken about the importance of Tubman and the services they provide for victims of domestic abuse and other things like that. That as the only ones were doing that, and actually had not had the opportunity to work with NYFS at all. So at this point, NYFS's program started in April and was not something our police department was using. They had a conversation last week and said, well, we certainly could be using some of this. One of the critical differences is that Tubman provides 24-hour service, and a lot of these crises that the police end up at for domestic abuse victims are not happening between 8 and 5. And so the chief feels, through the information I've gotten from the city manager, that is still a very valuable resource for the people in our community that are in crisis situations, and really the only way to get them the support that they need at that time. So I think I'd thrown out last time in here $20,000. The ask from Tubman was 44, but acknowledging that there's going to be a transition here. We'll see where NYFS's program goes. but it's still something, when Chief Scheider says this is important, and important to these folks in this critical life stage, I want to find some way to ensure that that is still there. And I think the city manager's looked at some funding things he can talk about, maybe, but I don't want to speak for you the whole night, so.
He may defer to you to speak for him the whole
may.
night, I don't know. Mr. Treasurer.
Mayor and council, I think the last meeting, last time we talked about this, it was, considered maybe additional levy funding. One thing we could look at is public safety aid. We have, I think, about $69,000
Yeah, left.
under my budget of remaining dollars if everything was spent as proposed in the city manager budget. And just recall that we have the mental health coordinators funded through PSA, and we have an outstanding grant on that, so hopefully it'll be much more than that at the end of the day. But we still have sufficient funds. If you wanted to use public safety aid to fund the Tubman, that'd be kind of a one-year thing. It's not ongoing money, and then the conversation would happen again next year, obviously, looking at continued funding. It is eligible under the guidelines for public safety aid from the state, so it's certainly well within the parameters that we could spend those dollars for Tubman if the city council would like.
Right. And just a note, too, that in the memo from Tubman, they had talked about how Ramsey County had used some civil forfeiture funds for a one-time $40,000 contribution of funds. And I did check with staff, and under our regulations for our forfeiture funds, we really don't have the ability to use them for this purpose, so we wouldn't have the ability to do that. But I also was thinking about the public safety aid and forgot about that when I asked about the forfeiture, because that was front of brain. But anyway, that's good information to know. Councilmember Groff.
Thanks for the extra information. That's very helpful because, as you know, I have been working with NYFS for several years, and so I was aware of the new program and the DOJ grant that is for 5 years, and so that's why I was really focusing on NYFS and this issue because they are Ramsey County and Tubman is more Hennepin County. However, your point of not having 24 hours a day is very important, and I did talk to the CEO, and we won't be doing that really soon because that's a complicated process
Sure.
For NYFS. So I think, given that, I would like to see it funded some way. I don't have the answer to that, but I'm open to discussion on it.
Councilmember Schroeder.
Just a question, what would happen if we didn't fund it? Would the services stop then in Roseville?
I can't speak for Tubman. I think they would continue to try to provide the services as much as possible. They've had to lay off staff because of reduced funding, so there might be less availability. What that exactly means for Roseville is kind of hard to say, but certainly their resources would be shrunk. So whether they contract staff more or just try to make do with what they have and probably be overwhelmed in the amount of cases, make the best they can. But it's not as if they would stop serving our community, just maybe
Well,
not
and then on the flip
consistently.
side, if we fund it, is that funding for all these, more people in Hennepin County? Or are they going to dedicate more services to Roseville then?
We would enter into a contract where we would, stipulate what our expectations are. That $44,000 amount came from the amount of people that they served in the city of Roseville.
And specifically to legal aid
Legal aid, yes.
and crisis management and legal aid, so versus some of the other programs that they offer, either in other counties or for a region-wide services.
And in talking to other city administrators that do have this contractual agreement, it's based on the amount of clients that are served, and there's a whole contract as part of that. So if there was some approval for funding in part of the budget process, we would eventually need to bring forward a contract between us and Tubman outlining our expectations and what services they provide. It'd be a one-year contract, but it'd be something.
And one more piece on that funding, would then part of that actually then, could NYFS do part of that? And as Councilmember Etten said, only fund 20 because instead of doing 44, because some of the other services can be put over to the other organization? Is that a possibility?
I expect that'll happen.
Yeah, so NYFS isn't asking for any additional
Right,
funding.
well,
They have
that's what I
they have
mean,
they have the
yeah.
grant, so we're able to use it right now. There's no
Right.
cost to the victim, certainly, and no cost to the city at this point to do that. And that's how the Tubman model used to work. There was external funding sources, and it just happened. And so I think it'll be the same way with NYFS, at least for the next 5 years. Beyond that, who knows?
Right, because I feel the same way, because we have a relationship with them right now, and the more we can utilize their services and be part of that organization, I think I would prefer that if there's a way, but I do know that we're lacking in that one area. And so if there's a way just to cover that one particular area and not anything else, if that's a possibility.
I do think, Councilmember Schroeder, as we approach this issue next year, we'll have a year of information working with both NYFS's new program as well as Tubman at some level, and we can kind of report back saying, here's what we've seen, observed. Is it a 50-50 split? Is it 70-30? What is it to help us inform us of what our next steps are? And it's too premature to guess what that is at this point. But we'll have some more data that we can actually look at and try to figure out what's the best arrangement for the city of Roseville.
And just to clarify, so that it sounds like, the primary daytime service provider would essentially be the NYFS, and then for those
Potentially, yeah.
24-hour
Like the
off
sleep.
hours kind of things, it may be Tubman is what I'm kind of hearing. So, I think that it probably makes sense to try to be supportive of Tubman so that they can provide those services in Ramsey County, especially in those off hours. It helps that it would not necessarily for 1 year be levy funding, and then we can revisit it over the course of next year and see what makes sense. So potentially that could be something where all we would have to amend is our budget and not the levy request if this item is something the council wants to look at funding for 2025. And for that matter, I'm not sure that there's a prohibition against increasing our preliminary budget at this
Right.
point because it's a budget.
Yeah.
And as long as the funding isn't through an increase to the levy, the only thing we can't increase after this month is the levy. So even if we didn't put it in our preliminary tonight, conceivably it could be added as long as it's not dependent on levy funding that hasn't been offset otherwise.
Good point.
All right. Council salary was the third item. And I guess that's Councilmember
Right,
Hatton
goes
again.
right back to me.
Yeah.
I got to bring this up because I'm not running again. So, when it was curious to see City Manager Trudgeon again and did a fair amount of work looking. The initial list that I'd seen was the list on the bottom of our presentation, showing several cities of generally our size and maybe bigger for some of them around the metro, and their salaries were generally significantly above ours. And then he went and got some Ramsey County salary examples. My catch with those Ramsey County is several of them are smaller cities like Little Canada and Falcon Heights and things like that. So we end up looking pretty good in Ramsey County, with the city of Maplewood being significantly above us and others being kind of in our range or a little below, but again, often with a smaller city and less complication to the work. But when we look at that bigger, when we compare ourselves to Edina, Hopkins, Richfield, we're significantly behind. So I think for me, it makes sense that this has not been changed since 2002, I believe, that some increase is reasonable. And I've heard arguments about whether there should be an ongoing thing or whether the council should be making taking a vote anytime they want to increase salary. And I'm going to defer to you guys who might be around. Do you do $50 a month and then do 3% a year after that? Do you do $100 a month and say we're done? I think those kinds of numbers are reasonable at this point to move the needle some. But again, if you look at Ramsey County, we're a little bit ahead. If you look at those other comparables, then we are a lot behind.
I
it's splitting that
appreciate the information. And one thing that I was thinking about was when we look at other positions, and I'm going to pretend I know anything about HR at this point, so I'm looking forward to being corrected here. But I imagine that it's fairly typical to do sort of a work done, time use analysis and get an understanding of sort of what that looks like, and then see what kind of hourly rate theoretically is appropriate
Then
for
we
that.
should double it.
Well, what I thought might be an appropriate exercise is to actually kind of figure out how much work we are doing, through perhaps a little bit of a time use survey of the
strategic
council
planning.
members, and exactly, and try to get some sense of that, and then determine what might make sense from a policy perspective. The challenge is that I don't know that that can necessarily get done before November 5th, which is
Right.
the intervening election that has to happen by state law before a change in council and mayor's salary can go into effect. And so, but I just wanted to put that out there as something that might be helpful to me and perhaps even more so to justify to the public any changes if we did some of that kind of analysis instead of just saying, well, here's where we rank relative to other people, and so we should be there. I mean, I don't know that that feels like it's as thoughtful as it probably should be, especially given that it hasn't changed since 2002. So that's where I'm kind of coming from on this. I understand sort of the time pressure with the wanting to have an intervening election if you're going to put something into effect. But I also understand the notion of trying to do it right and do a good job by way of the public dollars. So I'm of a couple of different minds, at least on this, but I wanted to put that out there and certainly open it up to the rest of the council for some feedback and discussion. The other thing I just wanted to note is sometimes it is mentioned that it's expensive to become a council member, to run for office and all of that. And I'm not sure that I look at the council's salary as some sort of reimbursement for those
Fair.
expenses, as opposed to compensation to public servants for their time to do the job. And so that would be the perspective that I would come at it from and try to avoid sort of that reference to trying to recoup campaign expenses, because I think the mechanism for doing that is outside of the council compensation world, but rather in terms of seeking support through campaign finance laws and things like that.
Which
So
of the cities did we use as comps for the, when we did the comp study for the other?
So on that list, we had, this isn't a complete list of all the comps, but Edina, Richfield, Brooklyn Center, Fridley, and Oakdale.
And we did that for, we looked at those cities pretty carefully because of population size. Roseville's a little different than many of the cities in Ramsey County because of our
Yeah.
increase in population during the day and the services we have to provide. So I think just looking at Ramsey County doesn't give us a full picture.
And I would mention in Ramsey County, Maplewood was also a comparable city. So that's the only one in Ramsey.
And that's the one that's,
That's the one
that's
that's
quite a bit
high.
higher.
Significantly higher. Yeah.
what are they doing in Maplewood? I don't know. Anyway.
They're actually getting paid their gas and mileage.
So, I'm open to considering it. I just don't know how that's going to work and where the rest of the council is on that. So, where is the rest of the council on that? Councilmember Schroeder.
Well, actually, I agree with Councilmember Groff that I was thinking the same thing, that when we did the comp study, would we not be part of the employee group in a way, and that we should be using the same cities? It seems if we were picking a different group, it looks odd to me. You know what? Oh, we're going to pick this group instead of what everybody else got to use. So to me, it would seem like we'd want to use the same. And I know comparing, but that's what we do in the comp studies too. Is you look at like jobs where other cities are doing it, and so that's why if you can get something close to Roseville, that's typically one way to look at it. Versus just, how many hours you put in. Because my guess would be you're going to find different people take different lengths of time to do things. And so it's a little tougher to come up with how many hours and I imagine a mayor's time is you probably put in twice as much.
Well, that's where we make the big money.
So,
And are his billable hours more expensive too?
yeah. So anyway, I guess I'd go along more with Councilmember Groff's.
So that sounded like a proposal to increase Roseville's council salary to something over $10,000 next year?
No, I'm just saying that's something if we're looking at it. Yeah.
I think you need to do
Understood.
it gradually, and I mean, we haven't done this since 2002, so you don't do a huge,
Right.
bump, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, and my suggestion related to the time study was just to get a feel for how out of whack we might be. I mean, if we're
Right.
making, $4.51 an hour, maybe that's a signal that something might not be right there. The other thing is, where is it appropriate to compare the sort of the hourly rate for a council member as, just because other cities pay their council members a lot, I don't know if that necessarily means, because it's a political decision to a certain
Right.
degree too.
Sure.
and what's palatable to their taxpayers. Whereas, one could argue perhaps there is some basis to say, and it's a policy decision, obviously it's a decision of the council, perhaps the council salary should be equivalent to some level within the city workforce. Just say, as an example, you might say, what's the median step three?
concession stand.
What's the median step three across the whole city? What is that? And maybe that's what the council should be. I don't even know what the number is, so maybe that's not it. But I'm just throwing an example out as
We
to
get
how
on the
you
steps, we're gonna make a lot more money.
No, no,
I
no,
think
no.
that would go over real poorly.
Might. No, I was just going to say, I was thinking in the middle, because I think there's 5 steps. So step 3 was kind of in the middle of the range.
Yeah.
And that's how I picked that. But I mean, certainly there may be a much more sensible basis for it. But I was trying to come to something that was more than just they're doing it this way, so we should do it that way, or should it be more analyzed or analytical in terms of how we approach it? Once
That
again,
was sort of how we did it with the comp study for the other. for the
well, certainly,
cities.
yeah. I think the difference is that a lot of the pay of other types of employees is based on marketplace and
Sure.
competing in the marketplace, whereas council salaries, I think, are sort of a specialized thing that, once again, has a political factor in the decision making that I don't know that you can just say because they pay ridiculously high council salaries in Maplewood that we should try to emulate that.
Or that we're
Not to
going
pick on
to move to
Definitely
Maplewood,
could
right?
kick
Yeah,
with my
why are we
neighbor.
all not living in Maplewood
run
and
to
running for
run for
council, right?
Well,
Yeah.
let me tell you. Used to that.
Good point.
Of course, we hear the reasons for that every time we interview people for commissions. Is all the benefits of living in Roseville that we all enjoy. So,
It's true.
so I don't know where we want to go with this particular topic, or whether we want to try to do something before November, or if we need to spend more time thinking it through, or where we're at. So that's once again, I don't know that we have to decide it this evening unless we want to include some number in our levy, unless we try to offset it at a later date. So, council, what do you want to do with council salaries?
Well, as someone who does this during the day, unlike Robin, she does her thing, I do mine. I was like, well, if we did like a 3% for 5 years, we would come up a lot closer to the others, and of course, they would continue to grow as well.
Is that mic
Okay,
not working?
my mic is not on? No,
Oh,
It's not on.
okay.
It's just-
You just have to be closer to it.
Okay, if we did 3% for like 5 years, we would get about closer to 8,000. And then at some point, I don't know that it should be automatic though. I think that an annual, to even just to go to the COLA though, this hasn't been part of the COLA, and I'm not suggesting that it's always 3%. Because then it could get quite high, because 3% does add up. But for over time, at least during an adjustment period, it didn't seem like it would be too unreasonable to say, this year we're going to go with 3%. If we went with the 7,000 and you divided it by 52, you'd be at $135 per week, which would mean if we worked 5 hours a week on this, which of course some weeks yes, some weeks no, that'd be about $27 an hour. And so if you think of someone who has a professional responsibility, that seems a little bit low for what we're asked to do and how we're asked to govern. Of course, as you know, when you first start out, it's a lot more than 5 hours a week. You have to catch up on everything you didn't know that's been happening for years. Could be 20, 30 hours. So, and then you're in that $4 range. So just wanting to be aware that, it's pretty easy to do a quick judge and say, okay, $27 an hour. I don't know that many people in a high professional position would say that's an acceptable dollar amount. And I'm not making that judgment on that. I'm just saying if we are looking, what that would, a quick, but, at 3% on each year for a few years to get us closer to the others seemed to be a reasonable amount because it does accumulate over time.
So what you're suggesting then is, after 5 years, then revisit it?
I think, well, I don't even know it needs to be
Or-
automatic any year.
Okay.
Just say 3%, but just saying that.
Plan
after-
for 3%
a
over 5
plan and
years.
then maybe a cap, say, okay, once we get to that, then it's up to the next council, whoever's on it, to make a decision. But I was thinking more just if you started at 3%, especially because there's, $7,000, it's probably going to pretty small amount that you're not going to in that percentage.
Because I bet that doesn't even move the needle.
No, it, maybe goes us to 5.18%. I'm not sure.
It's 11, it's just about $1,200.
Michelle is saying, no, it does not.
Yeah,
It doesn't.
we estimated about $1,300, and if you add that, it would still be 5.17% levy. So it's
I'm not even sure why we're arguing about it. It seems like,
Because it's a
5.175.
hot potato.
It is a hot
Because
potato.
We
It's a
are
hard
setting
one.
our own
Own
salary,
salary,
and
yeah.
it's a political thing, so, and I completely understand that. I mean, there were, in past years, long discussions about spending similar amounts of money to support the Miss Roseville or whatever it was many years ago, so, and that was a huge controversy, so. It's always interesting during the budget time how these discussions go.
I would prefer some sort of decision made tonight if we can.
Well, we certainly need to add that $1,300 to the levy to make sure we don't exceed it, although rounding is a thing, but, all right. So, I think we may have an answer on that one, maybe?
Am I hearing 3% for the 25 budget?
I
And
would agree with that.
certainly we'll ultimately have a motion to
Yes.
make, but I'm just
Okay.
trying to see if,
I don't care. It's much smaller than what I was going to get y'all, but yeah.
well, you can say that because we
That's
don't
'cause
know.
you're leaving.
I know. That's why I said it. Trust me.
But thank you for bringing it up.
All right.
what did you have in mind, Councilman?
Like $100 a month.
Which would be about 9% at this point?
I hadn't done that math. It's probably over that. I think we're making around $550 something like that a month. So it's closer to
What would that do to
15,
the levy?
17%, whatever. What's that?
What would that do to the
17.
levy? Would it show up? Probably not.
So, and
Well, 500 times 12.
taking the cities that are in this list that are in our comp study, they average out at 96. I don't know if I erased that already. $9,600, $9,300. So this would move us from 7 to 8,200. Still well below the average, at least the people on this list that were from our comp study, right? Pulling out those cities. So you're still at the bottom, except for further.
And that would be about a $6,000 levy. impact.
6,000, and it'd be a 5.19% levy increase.
So
0.02.
0.02.
We could argue about it a long time, but
But it would be portrayed accurately as a 9 point whatever percent salary increase for council members, the big money grab.
Without a raise since 2002, though, I would like to point
Yes.
out.
That's true. We could probably divide it by that many years.
and then
to-
and then it's less than 1%.
yeah.
You could
I'm willing
pretend
to
you
have that
froze your
con-
salary.
I'm willing to have that conversation with residents, so.
And that was a total of what, $3,000 you said?
6,000.
For all of us? I mean, I'd be comfortable doing something in the middle too, saying 3,000 total between all of us and figuring that out. I think it's good form for us to move towards something. I don't know
Yep.
that we have to arrive immediately. I think it speaks to also the value. We keep putting the employees and making sure that they're being compensated correctly and fairly too. And so we want to make sure that the people who follow us also feel like this is a valuable job that they're doing for the city.
Well, I think one of the topics that was brought up and at some point in this conversation or related to it was the notion of sometimes it can be difficult to be a council member because you have childcare issues
Yes.
and things like that. And certainly an additional $100 a month would help
Yep.
with childcare
Defray that.
expenses during those hours, evening hours and things like that. So that might be something
There
to
are a lot of,
Saying it doesn't need to increase assumes that the people who are running for and making an office are independently secure financially.
right,
It assumes something.
and it
Right.
limits who can run, who can actually do the job, it limits.
Yeah, in a variety of ways, right? But so I don't think being at the bottom of the list is good. I don't think being second from the bottom is bad. But
The other thing is, a lot of us are on other committees, like, I know Councilmember Schroeder's on the Ramsey County League of Local Governments, and there's meetings with that. I'm on the NYFS board, and I'm on the Visit Roseville board, so
You're
you have
putting in a lot
other
of time.
responsibilities during the month, other than the council meetings and the strategic planning, which is coming up. quite a bit now. So anyway, that's my thoughts
And all
on
the
it.
social events and going
Right.
to, the parks, and
Right.
ribbon cuttings and all these, yeah.
And the build a park, the building, the park installation.
So if I were voting, and I'm only 20% of the vote, I would say to move the levy up $6,000, and we can have further discussion, because you can always go the other way. I really don't think $100 is an unreasonable increase over 22 years.
Is that a motion? That's the
Yes.
first off.
All right.
He made a motion.
I'll second.
All right, let me track this here. So we got the motion on the council salary. All right, and that was made by Councilmember Bratton, second by Councilmember Groff, for additional $100 a month. Is that how
Yes, sir.
that's what it was? Okay. Discussion on the motion. As the maker of the motion, any additional discussion?
I'd make it more for the mayor, but the mayor seems hesitant, so I'm going to leave it at 100 for him too. I think I've spoken to this enough. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember
I
Groff
think
is
I've
the
said
second.
my
All right.
piece on it, thanks.
Any additional discussion? I think we have beaten this proverbial dead horse. With that, we've got the motion before us to increase council salary by, and increase, let me change it, increase the levy
Yes.
not to exceed by $6,000.
Yes.
To allow for the possibility of increasing
Yes.
council salary
Correct.
by $100 a month for the 5 council members. Right. And if there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? That passes unanimously. So we have our first adjustment to the proposed not to exceed levy. Do we want to talk about a budget increase? Or do we just, on the Tubman subject, if we don't have to fund it with a levy, do we want to just kind of set aside the Tubman subject for further discussion and not specifically adjust the budget right now for that, since it doesn't,
Doesn't
we're not
matter.
precluded from doing that?
That's fine. I don't know what's going to change significantly, but that's fine. We can wait and see
Okay.
if something does change.
As long as there's funding for it.
Should we include it and then have it potential of having it removed later if something were to change?
Well, I was wondering if we are sure on a dollar amount at this point, or if we want to have some more conversation about that.
Yeah, we
That's a
just,
good point.
yeah, we see a $2,000, but I'm not sure what that's based
I
on.
had
it was
proposed,
$20,000.
I had proposed 20, understanding that we were trying to
Yeah,
watch
that
how
other
much we
stuff.
were spending, looking to ensure that the service continues, but not, that would be the most of any, are provided the most services right now due to some other factors in our city, but that would be the biggest contract they have with the Ramsey County City. So trying to balance that out, the amount of needs we have and costs that are being incurred with our budget and some other factors and NYFS, and so that's where I came up with that 20. It is not scientific.
Do you want to move something on the budget at this time?
Sure, I'll move that. $20,000 addition to the budget to support Tubman.
Is there a second?
And this is the discussion to potentially, but continue discussion, or are we adding?
This would add the number to the proposed budget for
It can always
2025.
go down.
It
But
can go
not,
anytime.
it wouldn't affect the levy at
Yeah.
this point.
So using non-levy funds.
Using non-levy funds, use
correct.
PSA dollars. Yep.
I'll second that.
All right, it's been seconded by Councilmember Strawn. Discussion on that motion, once again, to add $20,000 to the budget for 2025, using non-levy dollars to pay for it, as a contract with Tubman. Councilmember Bratton as the
Again,
maker.
I think we've talked about extensively. Y'all know where I'm coming from on that one.
All right. Councilmember Strawn is the seconder.
Nothing further.
Any additional discussion? Councilmember Schroeder?
Again, I would want to get more information on this because, again, I do think I want to see how much NYFS is going to play in this, and this number to me is just pulled it out of the air number. And so that's why this number is a little, when I asked the city manager how much this 24-hour service after hours happens, we didn't have actual numbers on how often and how many, because I was trying to get an idea on the, how much of the service are we utilizing to get an idea on the cost, because obviously it's important. So I think we're missing a lot of information, so I guess I want to make it clear that we would, if we add this in, that we would continue to have a conversation on it, because I want to make sure that we get some actual numbers and thoughts, and I know we need some time to do that.
I think that makes sense, Councilmember
Yeah, I
Graff.
would agree with Councilmember Schroeder. It's hard to make these decisions without data, and I really would like to know that Councilmember Adams spoke with the police chief, but I would like to kind of get some more firm numbers. However, I don't want anyone to call at midnight in a terrible situation and not have
Absolutely.
legal advice. So
Even one is,
even one is too
yes,
much.
I agree.
Well, and I think the point of the motion was that because it's a budget adjustment, it can go up or down
Yes, right.
after further discussion and analysis.
Right.
After today, I think we're just trying to put the placeholder in there, as I understood it, so.
That's-
And I
That's
just
what
want
I
to make
would-
sure it
yeah.
comes back to the council.
right,
You know,
yeah.
that it's just not
Be
stuffed in there.
delineated
and We don't,
separately.
yeah,
Yep.
so it needs to come back.
Hopefully amongst the five of us, we
Yeah.
won't forget about it between now and December.
Yeah, well, you never know.
True enough.
Yeah,
All right.
with the usage, and thinking about this as something that would be viewed again by whoever's here in a year. Right now, the NYFS program's been in place for almost 6 months, and they've expended $0 serving Roseville residents. And if you look at 6 months of service from Tubman, it's $22,000, right? So that's right last
Full
using.
service from Tubman, right?
Yes. So looking at that and thinking about transitioning and how our systems might need to change, making sure that piece is there, not just the 24-hour piece, but all pieces, because right now we don't use them at all at NYFS. For me, that's a reason to do something, because we don't need to be a city that is leaving folks in these crisis situations without the support they need.
Yep.
And I think part of that was a ramping up time because that.
Oh,
that
I
came in
understand. I'm
at
just saying that we aren't on that ramp yet for the city of Roseville.
the
So
whole, all the cities that are involved with NYFS.
Yeah.
Are getting there, but not there yet. So.
And I think it's worth noting too that this is for starting January 1st of 2025. So we will not have any funding between now and the end of this year for this from the city of Roseville. But I know that or I think from the memo, the funding from Ramsey County Attorney's Office is for 2024 only, and that's $40,000 that ends at the end of this year. So maybe this is a way to help supplement that transition, presuming that Ramsey County isn't able to do it again or whatever. I think the other part of this that's important to keep in mind is that there'll be another legislative session. There'll be continuing talks with the county as to how they do their business. And so we'll have a lot more information, next time we're looking at this in 2025, besides the discussion we're going to have later this year yet on the same topic. So between all of that, hopefully we can adequately serve people in the community with, as was noted, these crisis situations. With that, we have the motion before us to add the $20,000 to the budget for the Tubman services as outlined. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. That adjustment is made to the budget. I think we're up to, of those three topics, then we're up to the HR manager, back to that. Does anyone want to make a motion? This would be a motion to amend both the budget and the tax levy in some fashion in relation to this item, if that's the desire of folks on the council.
I'd make a motion to amend the tax levy and the budget for 6 months of an HR manager.
I'll second it.
All right, and 6 months would be about $73,000 if I do my 146 divided by 2 correctly.
To ramp us up for the 25,
All right.
26. I'm sorry.
And as the maker of the motion, Councilmember Strawn?
Nothing further.
Okay. Councilmember Groff?
I just think we need to start addressing this earlier rather than later, so that's why I'm supporting the 6 months in 2025.
All right, other discussion on the motion?
I support, because I think we need to keep talking about it, and maybe that's the best solution, but yeah.
All right. No amendment to go to a full year? All right, just checking. With that, if there's no other discussion on the motion, this is a motion once again to add $73,000 both to the tax levy and to the 2025 preliminary budget for the support of a half year of the HR manager position as outlined. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 4-1 with Councilmember Schroeder in opposition. All right. Then, we have some resolutions that we need to adopt, unless there's any further amendments we want to make to budget or tax levy on other subjects. that
Not this time.
up to this evening have not been broached? All right. So, the first resolution,
It's for the levy.
where are my resolutions?
Attachment 1.
So the first one is the levy.
Levy, yep.
Don't we have to pass a budget
Budget.
before we have a levy?
Legally, you only have to pass the levies.
I understand. I mean, just
That's fine.
philosophically, wouldn't you set
Yeah.
your budget before you set your levy? But I guess.
Do either way.
It's all happening
Either
in
way.
the same evening, so the order of things may not really matter that much. Although we have done the budget first before. But anyway, all except whatever motion a council member wishes to make.
Do we have the updated numbers
Ah,
first?
Yes.
So for the levy, we added 73,000 for the HR manager and $6,000 for the city council salaries. An additional 79,000 of levy. That's a total of 30,352,603.
Head nod from the finance director too, so.
What was the number again?
So 30,352,603.
Got it. All right.
I will move approval.
Second.
All right, so that is the levy resolution. Moved by Councilmember Etten, seconded by Councilmember Strawn. Discussion on that motion, Councilmember Etten.
I think we've talked about a lot.
All right.
I'm ready to go on.
Councilmember Strawn. All right, any other discussion on that motion? All right, with that, we've got the motion before us to adopt the resolution setting the not-to-exceed levy for the City of Roseville for 2025. As noted, if there's no further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
All right, that passes 4-1 with Councilmember Schroeder in opposition. Next, we have the resolution related to the 2025 budget.
And we did add 73,000 for the HR manager, 20,000 for the Tubman, and 6,000 for the city council mayor salaries, for a total increase of 99,000. That leaves us with a budget total of 73,509,845. 73,509,845.
All right. Is there a motion on the budget
I
resolution?
make that motion.
Second.
Been moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Etten, to adopt the resolution setting the preliminary not to exceed 2025, no, not to exceed, just the preliminary 2025 budget at the numbers indicated by City Manager Trudgeon. Discussion on the motion as the maker, Councilmember Groff.
No.
Right, seconder, Councilmember Etten.
No, thank you.
Any additional discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
All right, that passes 4-1 with Councilmember Schroeder in opposition. That brings us then to the EDA levy. I don't believe we've made any changes this evening to the EDA levy unless somebody wants to at this point. That resolution is the third resolution. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Strawn, second by Councilmember Schroeder to adopt the proposed EDA levy, and that, once again, is set at $364,856. No change to that. Discussion of the motion as the maker of the motion, Councilmember Strawn. As the seconder, Councilmember Schroeder. Any other discussion? Once again, this was before the EDA. The council has the EDA at our last meeting and recommended to ourselves for approval. I want to just thank again the staff for going back to the table on this one and bringing it back with the sharpened pencil, as it were. With that, we've got the motion before us to adopt that resolution setting the EDA not to exceed levy for 2025. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, and that resolution, that levy are set. These will be the numbers that go on the notices that go out to taxpayers for the Truth in Taxation hearing at the end of November timeframe.
November
The notices will
25th.
go out early in November. The meeting will be late November, and that'll be on the city's information as to when that is, as well as on the notice itself.
It's actually on the calendar
And it's on
too.
the calendar in the
November
request for
25th,
council.
November
There we go.
25th.
25th, right around Thanksgiving. With that, then, that concludes our budget items this evening. Financially speaking, we do have another item here, which is a consideration of a way to pay for water meter deposit refunds, as discussed previously by the council, through a transfer from the sanitary sewer fund balance. And I believe Finance Director Petrick, you'll be introducing this item.
and you pretty much covered it.
That's what's on my agenda item here.
I appreciate people talking because I have a cold and sound like a frog. So the cash balance is as of the end of 23. The water fund had 837,986. Sewer fund had a little over 3,000,007. The outstanding water meter deposits as of last week were 1,446,000. As properties have been sold, we have been refunding the meter deposits, obviously, and not getting new deposits in on the new homeowners. When this was first discussed in March, the council didn't want us to consider just refunding when properties are sold because that could take 40 to 50 years. And I don't disagree with that. I looked at alternatives. I looked at what if we refunded a third each year. That would make more work for staff. In some cases, the meter deposits are so small because people were in their house when we first started doing deposits. So it just made sense to do it all at one time, either the fourth quarter of this year to get it cleaned up in the same year, which made sense to me. The other thing is the water fund has been paying for all the costs related to the meters and the radios that read the water that flows through, but the sanitary sewer fund derives its revenues from the flow of the water, just in a different direction. So it made a lot of sense to me that funds be transferred from the sanitary sewer fund to the water fund, which is where we hold the deposits, and get refunded on the quarterly utility bills that we bill for water, sewer, storm, and recycling. Questions?
All right, and this did go before the Finance Commission at their last meeting, and they concurred with that recommendation,
Yes.
right? And I don't know, can we put that chart with the balances up on the, I don't know if somebody can put it on the overhead camera there? Just because when we talk about numbers, sometimes it helps folks to see the actual numbers.
There.
Thank you. All right. And we will try not to have any questions from Ms. Petrick because she would benefit from not
You like
having
water,
to
though.
answer.
You like water.
No. Good.
All right.
Just don't make me talk.
To give a break to Ms. Petrick, we'll check with the members of the public to see if anybody from the public wishes to speak to this item. Does not appear to be the case. What's the thought of the council? Councilmember Schroeder.
I think it makes perfect sense to do it all at once. And how many households are we talking about here? Like thousands, right? I mean,
Yes.
so if you think about it, when she talks about trying to break it up and you have that many, that's a lot of work.
It's a lot of,
So I mean, I'm not, yeah. And so why, that doesn't make, and then if you really think about what would you save, you'd be spending more money on the time. So it makes a lot of sense that we would just go ahead and do this.
We have about 16,000 accounts, both residential and commercial and apartments.
Yeah.
Commercial, we looked at it, but the dollars are so small.
Right. So, no, it makes sense.
Right. One of the reasons I put the fund balances up there is that the sewer fund is quite healthy, even beyond what's needed for its operating reserve level, although obviously there are other things that go into that is used for. And the water fund is not as healthy, we'll say. And so this does make some sense as a source of funding, it would seem. And certainly if the finance department is okay with it, that's a good endorsement for a plan. So we have the request before us. Is there a motion from the council?
I would make that motion.
Second.
All right. Moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Etten, to authorize the transfer of funds and the payment of the refunds as outlined. I think there was, the question was raised, is this something that can just be a credit on the bill?
That's the
Yes,
plan.
that's what it's,
Yeah.
we're not cutting 16,000 checks.
Good.
It'll be a credit on the fourth quarter.
Perfect, perfect. All right. Very good. So we've got the motion before us to authorize that plan. Any discussion on the motion as the maker, Councilmember Groff?
Well, I just think we have to consider staff time here, and it just makes sense to clean this up in this calendar year and not take more of their time cutting small checks and doing bookkeeping that could go on for, as she said, 40 or 50 years. That's an ongoing cost that would be exponentially greater than what we're doing right now.
And as the seconder, Councilmember Etten?
I agree.
All right. Other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. That plan is approved. All right, Ms. Petrie, get better. Next,
She's
next,
not done yet.
well, I think Mr. Trudgeon can handle this one. How's that? Executive decision.
There is one modification to the delinquent utility accounts. We're removing 2,000 Herschel.
Okay.
All right,
They aren't delinquent.
all right. Noted. Thank you, Ms. Petrie. Now, go home and get better. All right, with that, we have item 7B before us, which is to consider certifying unpaid utility charges, property tax roll. Mr. Trudgeon, to introduce this item.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is something we do routinely each quarter, and to certify unpaid utility and other charges to the property tax roll. This is our method to make sure we collect money that we have expended through the purchase of utility, water, and sewer capacity that we do need to recover. So in front of you tonight is a resolution to consider certifying those listed, with the exception of 2,000 Herschel, to the county, to the property tax roll. This actually is an opportunity for a public hearing, so we did notify everybody that was on that list that this is an opportunity to come forward and contest anything that they may want to. I think the 2,000 Herschel, they did come before the meeting, and it turned out that they did pay on auto pay, so it wasn't caught. So with that, we would like you to consider the resolution, certainly consider a public hearing. I would note also there is one very large delinquent taxpayer there, that is a
Delinquent
hotel.
ratepayer?
Ratepayer, I should say, that is a hotel. This is something that we do consider as part of our hotel licensing. And we're, just as a quick update, we are in the process of sending out those applications and doing inspections in October, with the hope of bringing those forward in November for consideration. And certainly, failure to pay utility bills is a major issue with granting that license. So we'll have to see how that sorts out. But I just wanted to call that out in case you're curious which property that was. So all we're asking tonight after the public hearing is to adopt the resolution without 2,000 Herschel.
All right, thank you. And that this being a public hearing, we'll officially open it up for members of the public to speak to this item. We have a throng of people in the council chambers this evening to complain about their utility bills and delinquency. So with that, we'll close the public hearing and move to council consideration of this item. As was noted, this is a fairly routine item. Normally, it has in the past been on the consent agenda, but because of the need for the public hearing aspect of it, on the wise guidance of our attorney, that's why it's handled as a public hearing these days. With that, we have the request to adopt the resolution certifying those delinquent accounts, with the note that 2,000 Herschel is not on the list any longer.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Etten, seconded by Councilmember Strawn, to adopt the resolution certifying those properties, the delinquent amounts to the county for their property collection with the property taxes. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. That is approved. Those items are certified. We don't have any council minutes this evening to consider. That would bring us to our consent agenda. Mr. Treasurer, would you give us an outline of the items on our consent agenda this evening?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 10A approves payments in the amount of $1,813,589.72. Agenda item 10B approves a massage therapy establishment license for Birch Tree Bodywork LLC at 2499 Rice Street. Item 10C approves an expenditure for a new boiler purchase and installation at the Roseville Skating Center. Item 10D approves corrected rates for the city cafeteria benefit contributions for city employees. City Council previously approved these rates on September 9th, but it was discovered after the approval that the contribution rates were miscalculated, so the rates in your packet tonight are the correct rates. Item 10E approves a resolution awarding the contract for the Dale Owasso Sanitary Sewer Lift Station project to Pembroke Companies for $535,715. I would note that the RCA has, under the motion, has the wrong lift station there, so I just want to make it very clear this is for the Dale Owasso Sanitary Sewer Lift Station. Then finally, item 10F adopts a resolution authorizing the Roseville Economic Development Authority to apply for Metropolitan Council Livable Communities Affordable Home Ownership Funds on behalf of the city. And that is the consent agenda.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trudgeon. Is there a motion on the consent items?
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Schroeder, seconded by Councilmember Groff to approve the consent items as presented, noting the correction on the lift station
Yes.
as outlined. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Strawn?
I just wanted to check in to see, do you know how many, Mr. Trudgeon, how many massage therapy licenses this brings us to?
You know, I was going to check Councilmember Strawn. I think we're 27, 28, about that amount.
And have we had any additional concerns or any additional developments on the property that was changed ownership?
I really can't comment directly on that. I think we are monitoring that situation.
Okay.
But beyond that, I can't really comment.
Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion on the motion to approve the consent items? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. And I would note, actually, the agenda doesn't mention it, but we did have in our meeting materials minutes from our September 9th
That's
council
right,
meeting.
we did.
It's number 9.
I think we just missed it.
Yeah, but normally there'd be a 9A
Oh,
that
I
would say
see.
minutes
Oh, I
from
see
such
what
and
you're
such,
saying.
and so that's why I skipped right over it, because I hadn't seen that. But we do have them before us and presented. So are there any changes or corrections to the September 9th minutes as presented? If not, a motion to approve those would be in order.
I move approval.
Second.
All right, been moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Schroeder to approve the minutes of our September 9th council meeting
Yes.
as presented. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, and those minutes are approved. And that then brings us back to the future agenda review. Mr. Trudgeon, if you would go through the items upcoming on the future agenda.
Yes, not an official council meeting this Wednesday, but strategic planning focus group for the city council. This will just be the city council attending along with our consultants. That'll be from 4 to 6:30. That will be in the Willow Room downstairs. So go down the stairs and take a right past the Historical Society, and you'll find that room. I'll be there at the start to make sure everything is all set up, but otherwise you'll be on your own for about 2.5 hours. After that, our next council meeting is October 7th. We're going to have the recycling contract. Consider potentially awarding a contract for carts. Also have some right-of-way vacations, as well as receiving a utility rate study update from Ellers. On October 11th, this will be our first joint department head and city council strategic planning meeting. That'll be on Friday, October 11th, from 1 to 5 p.m. And for that meeting, we'll be at the Fireside Room at the Oval. I'll remind everybody as we get closer these days, because we do switch around a little bit. Then after that, on October 14th, at kind of the work session, we have Ramsey County Commissioner Mary Jo McGuire there for presentation on a couple topics. We also will receive from staff at Ramsey County a presentation regarding their EDA, HRA legislation. They're looking to do something again this year, and they're trying to do their due diligence prior to coming down to the legislature and talk to cities to answer any questions, and I imagine gain our support. And then also we would talk about the police department staffing allocation study, kind of looking at beyond just staffing and also shifts and everything else and how we're allocating our resources in a way. This will just be an introductory conversation about that work, and then we'll go from there depending on the conversation. And that's what I have for future agenda.
And just to be clear, the Ramsey County that legislation did not end up getting adopted last
correct.
year. And so
Did
it's
not.
not that they're going back again for the same thing in the sense that they already got it. They're going back again because they didn't get it
Did not
last
get
year.
it.
among a lot of other things that other people didn't get as well. All right, with that, any questions on the future agenda or items council members may wish to add to future agendas or council reports and announcements? Councilmember Strawn.
Council report. Wanted to thank all of the folks who helped put on the Wild Rice Festival. It seemed a little bit smaller than usual, but
Could've been
there was
storms.
some rain at the beginning that kind of threw things off. But as always, it was a really special event, and it was nice to be part of. I noted there was also a Minnesota Wild Hockey Festival at the Rosedale Center. They could have used some of the promotion of the Wild Rice Festival for their folks. It looked pretty sparsely attended. I did have the opportunity to go to the Habitat Home open house on Friday, and special thanks to all the folks who were involved in prepping that. If we wonder how our work in the EDA is benefiting the community, it is going to be a single mom with 8 children occupying this 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom home. It was very nice. It had green space in the back and an outdoor space. The other side has not yet been closed on, so that exactly who would be living there was unknown. But really lovely to see that support, and especially there was the one individual from the community who had offered financial support as well as building support, as well as he was there really promoting this. So really great opportunity for us to see our work in action. And then just an invitation on October 12th from 10 to 2. There's a community event at Troy's Corner Auto Care. He's giving away pumpkins. Last year he gave away 2,000, so we ordered 2,500 this year. And everything there is free, and it's a really great opportunity for community members to come and receive something for free and feel like they're part of the community. So thanks to him, and make sure everyone knows they're invited.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Groff.
And thanks to all the people who showed up for the park build on Saturday.
Muddy
It was a
build.
little rainy.
Even rainier.
I
yes.
know, we had to delay an hour, but people hung around, and then at 10 o'clock we got started. Worked in the mud, just wore our boots, and slowed us down a little bit, but we got quite a bit done.
We got a fair amount done.
You got a swing up, and I got a couple things done.
Yep.
Only managed to drop one bolt down the hole, but
Actually, that's pretty good. That's a good record. Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks to everybody who showed up
it's nice
to
to
help
see
with
the
that.
neighborhood
Yep.
gets ill excited about it,
Yep.
because when things start to come together, it's an exciting time.
Yep. And more to come on that park as the rest of it is developed
course.
beyond the playground as well. Yep. I know the site looks a little bare right now,
Right.
but
Yeah.
there's more to come. Right. Other council announcements or communications? All right. The only item remaining before us this evening is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Strawn, second by Councilmember Groff to adjourn. No discussion on motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously, and we are adjourned at 7:52 PM, everyone. Thanks.